The opposition is preparing to argue the merits of an alternate emissions trading scheme which slashes the government's planned rises in household electricity bills.
The plan promises smaller, more gradual rises and splits renewable energy from emissions trading. For more on the alternative scheme, the opposition spokesman on climate change and the environment, Greg Hunt, joins us now from Canberra. Greg Hunt, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome back to Canberra.
It's a pleasure.
Now, take us through what you can tell us, at least at this early stage. I know it's not been formally released, but clearly a number of leaks to major newspapers this morning about your alternative emissions trading scheme.
Well, our view is very clear. The current scheme, in its current form, will send jobs and emissions to China and to India and overseas. So effectively, it could make the problem worse. What we think is that the government should have modelled alternative approaches. They didn't. We have, and we'll release that today, but the message is absolutely clear. Jobs can be saved, emissions can be lowered, and it can be done in a way which is cheaper. And that, I think, is a profoundly important message. Jobs can be saved, emissions can be lowered, and it can be done in a way which has less impact on Australian mums and dads and small businesses.
That sounds almost too good to be true, but I guess we'll see the details later on today. But one key feature that at least features in a leak to the Australian newspaper is this setting of a best practice baseline for traditional carbon-based emitters such as electricity generators and the like. And if they don't reach, or once they go above that baseline, then they have to purchase permits. So you don't have to purchase all permits for all emissions. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, that's a system which has been proposed. We'll have more detail on that later today. But essentially it's a model which has been looked at around the world, and it's a concept of unders and overs, if you'd like, where people deal with the difference. The problem that we face right now, and the state premiers have highlighted this to the Prime Minister, is that if this system proposed by the government goes through, you will see liabilities crystallise for the power companies. They'll have reportable obligations. They risk being in default of their credit responsibilities, and that could mean a significant and major crisis in the power sector. That's not what we're saying. That's what the power companies are saying. That's what the Victorian and Queensland premiers have been saying to the Prime Minister. And that is, I think, a very significant issue. So we want to provide a better alternative there. We also want to provide clear, strong, renewable energy legislation, and that's why we want to separate out and decouple the renewable energy legislation with its vision of solar and geothermal and wave power from a very flawed emissions trading scheme.
There seems to be some pressure building up behind that argument from other quarters as well. But you mentioned there before that it was imperative that the government scheme didn't get through. It won't get through, will it? Because you won't be supporting it, and it would seem that it doesn't enjoy the support of the Greens and the key independent senators either. So it will be voted down on Thursday. Is that fair to say?
Well, our view is that in its current form, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable because it sends jobs and emissions overseas to China and India and elsewhere.
All right. Well,
as for the other parties, I wouldn't presume to prejudge their position, but they seem to have very significant issues, just as we do.
But at the same time, I mean, some key Canberra watchers say that it's not out of the realms of possibility at all that after voting it down this first time, that you actually do support it a second time that it comes back to the Senate. Is that the game you're playing?
Well, our test is a very simple one, and it's about the quality of the scheme, whether it acts in a way which helps Australia reduce emissions at lowest cost without sending masses of jobs and any jobs, indeed, to China and India and elsewhere. We have two tests, emissions and jobs, and all of that is based against the background of cost. And so we've set out principles, and if the government will talk with us, then we will talk with them. Malcolm has made the offer, but what we see at the moment is the government wants its own legislation defeated for political purposes. This isn't about the great heft of history. This is about a political point which they have. They want their legislation defeated. They won't talk about it.
Well, that's not entirely true. They'll certainly talk to you, and the Rudd government's made it clear that they're prepared to sit down and talk as long as you present amendments, not principles, as you say, but some formal amendments that they can really look at, negotiate over and incorporate. Why won't you do that?
Well, we have said in very detailed terms that we have issues in relation to the exclusion of agricultural offsets, the inclusion of a system in relation to fugitive emissions or mining emissions, which isn't in the US system. These are detailed and precise, could easily be dealt with by the government, but we have just at this moment come to the position with the Frontier Economics where we are presenting some clear alternatives and will be presenting clear alternatives. They need to be discussed with industry and the community, and they need some time to be worked through. The key point here...
So they're not sort of ready to go. This is not a ready-to-go scheme, if you say they need some time to be worked through.
We do want to work these things through with the people who create jobs and the people whose jobs depend upon a good scheme. And that is sensible and prudent. Remember this, I say respectfully, that under any circumstance, the full emissions trading scheme would not come in until the 1st of July 2012. It makes no difference to the commencement of that scheme whether that were legislated in November or whether that were legislated in February. But it makes every difference to the quality of that scheme, whether it is done after we see the results from the US and from Copenhagen and after we've had a chance to look at alternatives with people who create jobs and people whose jobs depend upon the scheme.
Greg Hunt, just finally this morning, are you very disappointed by news poll results today in relation to the preferred Prime Minister figure in particular and the popularity of your leader, Malcolm Turnbull?
I actually think under the circumstances it's a very strong result.
You think 17% satisfaction, up 1 point, I'll give you that. That's a pretty good result.
I think under the circumstances, with all of the noise which was around last week, it's a clear, strong result. And my view is that Malcolm has a special, strong, unique understanding of not just the waves of history, but how we craft a debt-free future. And he's a powerful leader, and I think he does a tremendous job.
Greg Hunt, good to talk to you this morning. Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure.
A good loyal deputy there looking at the positives.
That's what you got to do.
Now it's